Hey everybody, how's it going? Connor today here at etrailer.com. We're going to be taking a look at Firestone's Coil-Rite air springs here for our 2011 Chevy Avalanche. As you can see, it's going to be a bag that installs inside of the factory coil springs. Now essentially how this works is we're going to inflate the airbags to a varying degree of PSI depending on how much support we need. That is then in turn going to stretch out and it's going to make this airbag really stiff here, and what that does is it sort of prevents the coil springs from compressing as much relative to how much air pressure we have in there. Therefore, if we have a bunch of weight in the bed and we're experiencing some sagging issues here with our coil springs, we can actually stop them from compressing as much with these airbags here. So it's going to be a great addition whether we are hauling a lot of heavy loads or we're towing a trailer and we need extra support. So the system is pretty basic and simple. It's only going to be composed of a few main components. So you can see we have the actual air springs here. We have these little support discs which help align the fittings on the airbag so they don't run into the side of the metal here and create any damage. And then we have our airline tubings followed up with our inflation valves. So here's where we mounted our inflation valves. Now you have enough airline to pretty much mount these wherever you want. We were going for more of a concealed look, so we just went ahead and mounted them to this bumper beam here. They're still accessible, but they're not going to be seen from outside the vehicle. So if you find that you're going to be towing frequently or hauling heavy loads frequently in our truck bed, you're definitely going to want to look into some suspension enhancements such as these air springs here. And the reason for this is simple. Our truck is going to handle and brake pretty different depending on how much weight we have in the truck bed or on the tongue of the trailer. Some of the issues we may run into is our headlight aim is going to be off, so we're going to be shining our headlights into oncoming motorists. We're not going to have as much weight on the front axle because we're loaded here in the rear, and what this is going to do is it's going to take weight off the front axle, so we're not going to have near as much stopping power because the majority of our braking is actually done on the front axle. Then another issue you may notice is if it goes on for long enough, if you find yourself to be towing long enough, towing long trips, we're actually going to cause some irregular wear patterns on our front tires there because the camber and caster is not correct. So it's going to save us money in the long run because we're not going to be replacing our tires as often or our worn out suspension components that are going to be caused by the heavy weight we have in the rear. So in regards to installation, I really like this kit here. You have a couple different options, but I'm definitely going to go out and say that this particular kit here is going to be one of the easier installs. There's not going to be a lot of components to the kit, and they're going to install pretty seamless. You're not really going to be able to tell you have any aftermarket components installed on the vehicle. They're going to be tucked right up here into our coil springs, and then we're going to have our inflation valve hidden as well. Now I will level with you guys here, it is a little difficult to maneuver the air springs up in the coils, but once you get the hang of it, it shouldn't take you long at all, and it isn't really difficult per se, it just takes some time. So I definitely recommend you guys check out this option for your vehicle. But now that we've gone over some of the benefits and features, let's go ahead and jump right into installation and show you how easy it is to do yourself at home. So the first step of our installation here, you want to take some of our airline here, we want to cut off around a 3-inch section here, about like that, so we can attach it to the bottom of our airbags, and this is going to allow us to deflate all the air inside the airbag. We're going to go ahead and compress this as much as we can with some force, and then we're going to install a plug in the end of our airline tubing here to keep it sort of compact. We've already done this here to this one, and this is about what it should look like here. Let's go ahead and show you what we did now. We're first going to depress in the center of them, take my 2 palms here, press down, and then we're going to take one of the ends here and press it into one another. Now I'm going to take the other end and fold it like so. Now if you have someone that can insert the plug for you while you're pressing down, it's going to be ideal, but you can do this yourself. Just like that. So now we see we have this opening here in the lower portion of our coil. We're going to go ahead and take our air spring here. We're first going to sort of flatten the end there, because then we're going to push it through the coil like so. And now what we can do is we're going to maneuver the air spring working back side to side, and we're going to try to position it so it's going to sit vertically centered inside the coil here. So this is definitely easier said than done, but we're just got to play with it a little bit. Move each side, try to sneak one edge past the coil and work our way up. So now we've got our airbag completely inside our coil here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to spin it around here so we have the airline facing us. But we're basically going to remove that plug here. And then we're going to sort of adjust it a little bit more to get it to sit properly. So now that the airbag, it's got some more air in it now, it's sort of taking the shape of the coil. What we're going to do is we need to go ahead and remove this airline here. And as we said earlier, we'll do our best we can to push it as high up within the coil spring as possible. In order to get that airline tubing out, if you have a 1/4-inch wrench laying around, that's definitely going to help. You'll stick that over the airline tubing, and then you'll press up on the push to connect, and we should be able to pull the piece of airline out just like that. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to install our supports here on the bottom of the coil spring on each side. Now we have a large hole here in the center, which is going to match up with a hole here on the bottom of this little support, or this dampener, whatever you want to call it. So we're just going to loosely place those over, try to line everything up on both sides, about like that. So now we're going to take the remainder of our airline tubing here, and we're basically going to cut it directly in half, or as best as we can. So now that we've got roughly the center point of our airline tubing, we're going to take a razor blade here. We do offer specific airline cutting tools if you'd like to get one of these, but as long as we make a nice and square cut, we shouldn't have too many issues with the line sealing properly. So this is what we want our cuts to look like. You can see the end of the line here is nice and square, so we're not going to have any issues with sealing. So now we're going to come to the back of the vehicle here, directly in front of the rear axle towards the cab. We're going to see an opening here that we can sneak one end of our airline tubing up through. There's going to be a hole in this little dampener right here, which we should be able to guide the airline tubing through. And then we should be able to press it up, and if we align the support correctly, it should slide through the hole in that as well. Now you can see we have our airline tubing directly below our airbag. So then the next step is obviously going to be to connect the airline tubing inside the push to connect fitting on our airbag. We're just going to shove that up there as far as we can, and then we're going to pull down to lock it in place, just like that. So now we can go ahead and repeat that process on the other side. So now we're going to take the remainder of our airline tubing here. We're going to route this away from the exhaust, away from the moving suspension components, anything that could trap or heat the line to damage it. Basically, we're going to run this here to the rear of the vehicle, somewhere in this area, because that's where we're going to be installing our inflation valves. So let's go ahead and do that now, then we'll show you the route we took. So here you can see we have our airline routed here. What we did is we want to make sure we gave ourselves some slack here directly below the axle where that spring cup is. We went ahead and tied it to, on the passenger side there's going to be a vent for the rear axle we secured it to. On the driver's side there's going to be some brake lines. We have a couple zip ties here attaching it to our lines to sort of stop it from falling back down here. So we came all the way over the center support here where our spare tire is held in place. And what we did is we brought one to either side, and there's going to be a wiring harness on the frame here that we can zip tie it to secure it further. And then we have a couple more zip ties here. And then this next part really is going to depend on where you want to mount your inflation valves. Now if we take a look at the bottom of the bumper bracket here, we're going to have this same bumper bracket on either side here. It's going to be a nice flat surface, and it's going to be hidden, so we're not going to be able to see it, but it's still accessible just by easily reaching under the vehicle. So here's a little bit of a better look at this bumper bracket here. We're just going to drill a hole in the bottom of this so we can mount our inflation valve. Take our 5/16 inch drill bit. We're going to go to about the center of the support here. Just go ahead and drill our hole out. Make sure we have safety glasses on for this step. I'm going to come back, take a file here, get all the rough edges down. So now we're going to take our inflation valve here. We're going to install one of the flat washers over that end there. The threaded end is actually going to be facing down because that's where we're going to put the air chuck to fill the bags. We'll come to the top of our bracket here. We'll just press that straight down, just like so. And then we can come back with our other flat washer here, and then our jam nut. Now we'll go ahead and just tighten that down. We're going to take two 12mm wrenches. If you have a 12mm wrench and a 12mm socket, that'll work as well. We can use that to just go ahead and tighten down our fitting here. It doesn't need to be real tight, but we do want it snug. So now we're going to take our airline tubing here. We're going to cut some of the excess off. Then we can go ahead, take the other end, and push it into the push connect fitting and pull it out to lock it in place. And the final step here, we'll go ahead and install our cap. Now we can repeat that process on the other side. So the final thing we're going to do here is, we see these metal plates which come in our kit. These are actually heat shields, and we're going to attach them to the exhaust. We're going to bend these tabs just a tad here, and then we're going to go ahead and attach that up here onto our tailpipe. And what this is going to do is, it's going to shield the heat from our airbag here. So we want to make sure that we're positioning these sort of plates here so that they're best going to shield the airbag. In order to attach these, it's pretty easy. We're going to have two band clamps here. Attaching it, we're going to need an 8mm socket. Go ahead and loosen both of those up. And now we can take one of them and sort of roughly show you how this is going to sit here. So we actually have two in the kit. If we have a model with dual exhaust, we'd want to use one on each side. But since they gave us two and this is a single exhaust model, we're going to go ahead and install one here like so, and one here as well. Pretty simple, pretty basic. Just going to go ahead and slide the band clamp through there first, and then we can come on top here and make our connection. Just like that. Now we're going to go ahead and repeat this same process on the other side of our tailpipe here. So now we can go ahead and test out our system to make sure we don't have any leaks. We're going to remove the cap to our inflation valve. Then we're going to take our air juck here and put some air in our airbags. So now we need to go ahead and check for leaks. In order to do this, some of the air leaks, if they're large enough, we can actually hear them. But if it is a faint leak, we're going to need to take a soapy water solution here. It's good practice to do this anyway, but we're just going to spray down all of our connection points. Now we should only have two, which is the inflation valve and the fitting into the airbag. So we're going to go ahead and spray those both on each side. Now what we're going to be looking for is, if we do have a leak present, we're going to see some rapid forming bubbles coming out of the fitting, the hose, wherever the leak is. And if that was the case, we'd want to take the airline out and recut it to get it more straight. Then we can press it back into the fitting, and hopefully that fixes it. And that's going to do it today for our look and installation of the Firestone Coil-Rite air springs here for our 2011 Chevrolet Avalanche.